name is Sina, and I'll be doing a quick analysis of Nike.com and their online store. The reason I'll be doing this is because there was a question on a Slack channel that I'm part of where an MBA student was asking, how do you measure the success of something like Nike or Adidas on their web and mobile platform? And he was asking some good questions about, conversion, about localization, about optimization, and who we should target more, or, how to minimize dropout within checkout and stuff like that. So I will be sharing the way I think about these questions, although I won't be going through every single question to answer all of them. I will be basically sharing my thought process, and this will hopefully help the OP to either find the right answers or at least be able to generate better questions going forward, which will then help him connect the dots and get some answers. The way I'm thinking of approaching this is I put together a bunch of slides, like 7 slides, nothing, it's pretty straightforward, just to structure the thinking and the presentation. And I will be just going through how the Nike online store looks like initially. And after this, we will jump into the slides to talk a little bit more about the KPIs and basically how to approach different groups of customers and optimize based on their purchasing behavior. When I looked at the Nike website, I noticed that there is nothing special about this store compared to a lot of other online stores, meaning they don't have a particular, say, subscription package or anything that makes it different as a store. It's a typical store where you have a list of all their products and you can buy one or many of these products. You can do it as a guest without signing in, or you could do it by creating an account. And the process is pretty straightforward. I will still quickly go through some things. I've added some items to my bag already, and you can see that the checkout process is straightforward given that I am logged in, and I can pay using PayPal, or I can just check out with, and pay using a debit or credit card. And if I was not a signed in user, it would still be fairly straightforward, because I could just pick any item, and again, I have the choice of signing up or not signing up and buying it. So I won't go very deep into their sales funnel. I didn't come across any special features that they have to facilitate this process in a special way. And when I checked the conversion rate that Nike has on this landing page, it was 3.1%, I believe. And it was interesting because the conversion rate for Nike products on Amazon.com is 4%. So that would be an interesting thing to look at as well. But that's another conversation. With that said, I just want to I want to take a step back from Nike itself and talk a little bit about the notion of growth and KPIs for growth on an online store or on any product, and then kind of narrow down a little bit to Nike's context. So I think the first thing to understand about, before we want to go into specific KPIs or metrics to measure success, we need to take a big step back and realize that the concept of growth is all about, creating X dollars in value and then capturing Y% of that X, and knowing that X and Y are independent variables. This is something that Peter Thiel said, and I felt it was a very good way to put it. It means that, you're trying to make some money, generate some money by adding some value to users, and hope that you can capture some of that value for your business. And that these are independent, meaning you can create a lot of money and not keep any of it. That doesn't make you a successful business. You can create, less money but keep a lot of it, bigger margins, makes you a good business, and so on. So with that in mind, then by having that notion, that understanding of value, then we want to think a little bit about, okay, what is value in the context of that Nike online store? And I like to think from the bottom up by picking one Nike customer, and assume, okay, in the context of this one Nike customer on that Nike store, how do we define value? What are the different scenarios in which we could generate value and we could capture some of that value? Because if we understand how it happens for one user, then we can think a little bit about, okay, now we have more users, more possibilities, segments, etc. And then talk about prioritization of, okay, how do we measure success for each of these groups or each of these individuals, and which ones do we want to prioritize first, and so on. So I would say that if you are, a Nike customer, either you're a guest, meaning you have not signed in, you just somehow came to Nike through an ad or because you knew it, you're watching something on Netflix and you felt inspired, you want to buy something on Nike for whatever reason. You come in as a guest, you purchase something, and that's one scenario. There's another scenario where you are a signed in customer. Maybe you created an account a while ago, you ended up not buying anything, now you're back, now you're going to buy something, and you either Nike reminds you that you have an account, or your browser, your username and password is saved there, you sign in and you make your first purchase. Or you are a signed in customer and you have bought something before and you're returning. So this is either your second time or you've bought more than 2 times and you're the nth time customer. And in each of these cases, your incentives and the value you're generating for this business is going to be different. If you have bought like several times before and you're a returning customer, I would want to think about it in this way. How frequently do you buy stuff? Do you buy something once a month? Do you buy something once a quarter? Do you buy something once a week? And is there a pattern in the volume of your purchase? And if so, are you considered, are there a lot of other people who are also like you in that behavior, sharing that behavior, or no, are you an outlier? Are you somebody who's buying something every single day? Because most people won't be doing that. And based on each of these different behaviors that you could possibly have, there is a value associated to you. You're generating some amount of value for the business. And therefore, Nike would probably, at this point in time, given their current scale, they probably have different KPIs measuring success for each of these people. If you're somebody who are a guest, non-signed in, the definition of success is probably just conversion. You land on this page. If you buy something, that's considered success because you bought something once. But now that you have bought something once without creating an account, maybe there's a team or group of people in Nike whose definition of success is trying to get you to sign up and become a member. Because when you become a member, then you are probably more likely to be influenced by their future emails and notifications, etc., so that you will come back and buy more than once. So there could be a KPI around, bringing you back to buy more than once. If you're somebody who's been buying many, many times, let's go to the next slides. There can be different KPIs to make sure that you maintain that behavior, or maybe let's talk more deeply about it. So, but the recap for this slide is, when we think about goal setting and KPIs and definition of success for your behavior on a store like Nike's, we'd want to understand what sort of behaviors could you have, what sort of channels could you be coming from as well, which I didn't talk about too much, but we could touch on that. For example, if you're coming from an Instagram ad that says, this is the energy week, 25% off Nike products, and you come to the page, you're coming with the expectation that you're getting 25% off. And that expectation is different from someone like me who just went to Nike.com by typing Nike.com and pressed enter, because I'm not there because of a discount. I'm there for whatever other reason. So the likelihood of me buying something and you buying something are different depending on our expectation and how fast we can find something that meets our expectation. But the point is, taking a step back from that, by understanding some of the different scenarios that can happen and understanding the different possible incentives that people could have there, and then trying to understand the value of each, we could then talk about optimizing that journey for each, basically based on the value that each user brings. And on a high level, I think about it in 3 ways. Either there's no optimization, meaning it's a one-size-fits-all solution. We have all of these products, and you either are a returning customer or you're a one-time customer, and no matter what you do, we're not really responding or reacting anyways. We're just sitting there, you're coming to us, we're not coming to you. Maybe we're doing advertising, but we're not changing the platform based on your experience, whether you buy or you drop out, whatever. So Nike is not in this state. The second state is it's somewhat optimized. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about this in the next slide. Somewhat optimized means that we understand some of the customer segments based on the value that they generate, and we prioritize them based on that. And deeply optimized, it could mean potentially that it's personalized, meaning, and we will talk about this as well in the slide after the next. And In the deeply optimized state, we are trying to understand the person's behavior of each individual, have success metrics per individual, and deliver something that maximizes the likelihood of success per person. Let me connect my charger and come back to this. And while I do that, you can have a look at these slides and see if you can get a sense of where I'm headed. Okay, so in a somewhat optimized state, I think a common way would be one of the common metrics to look at is ARPU, average revenue per user. And we would want to look at the whole, bulk of the customers, people who are making purchases, and put them in different segments depending on how much value the business is generating or capturing from these people. For instance, maybe you are somebody who, imagine there are, just using arbitrary numbers and ratios, imagine there are 10% of Nike customers who buy once a month, and each time they pay like $2,000, right? That means they're buying relatively a lot and frequently too. And maybe there is a 10% of all customers who do that. So that means there's a segment that generates a lot of value compared to another group of people who may buy once a quarter and each time maybe $200, right? And they could be a majority as well. We don't know that. So based on these segments and how much value is generated from each segment, Nike could set KPIs for each segment and saying that, if you're a part of that 10% that buys once a month and $2,000 or $5,000 each time, I want to make sure that I will maintain that behavior. So they could define benchmarks that if that number drops, they will be alarmed and know that, okay, something is not working. We need to deliver something specifically to make sure that these people will continue buying once a month in that volume. So the KPIs would be focused on maintaining that behavior. Or you could be a customer group who is, so that would be sort of this possibility. Or there might be a group of people who are already generating some value, but you realize, hey, they're in this segment and they can be in this segment and generate more money. And maybe the effort that it takes us to push them up is actually not too much. So the activation energy is relatively low. And you realize, okay, for these group of people, it could be like a 20% of people who are buying, I'm just using arbitrary examples. Maybe the 20% of people who buy something once a month and I don't know, like $200-300, and maybe you think with very minimal investments, could be a feature, could be an ad, could be your content, whatever, you could get them to spend $300 or $400. So again, high reward relatively given manageable or low efforts. So for that group of people, that will be your KPI. Can we double the value that we're generating from these people? Can we double the ARPU for the people in this group? So this is a somewhat optimized state in which you come up with these segments and you look at the amount of value generated from each segment and how much effort does it take you to generate more value from that segment or to just maintain it, and based on that you prioritize. And obviously you're looking at your resources as well, your product and engineering and data resources. In the case of Nike, I'm gonna guess they have enough resources and they're probably doing all of these. So yeah, the recap here would be, you look at all those different segments, you come up with some goals per each of them, and based on that you define what should we do and what should we measure for each group. Now, if we want to come back to the context of this website, for signed in users, when it comes to people who are returning users, you may or may not be playing with the elements on this website. For example, what you show here could change based on whatever they have bought before, but I think it might be, and I mean, it's an assumption, you may have bigger growth levers if you approach them using the mobile app or the email or Instagram ads or whatever, where the attention is, because people may not be spending a huge amount of time here anyway. But again, there are other levers, such as, for example, if I'm a returning customer and I want to buy this particular shoe, they have this "you might also like" section that could be personalized to whatever else that I like. So if I buy a bunch of basketball related items a few times, they could probably learn enough about me to tell me what else I might like. And they could always collect that feedback based on whether or not I fall for that. Well, not fall for it, it's not trap. They could look at whether or not I find, okay, now it's not here anymore. Okay, this is a featured item, I think. Let me find something which is not a featured item. Like this. So I'm here to buy a basketball shoe and they tell me that I might also like these other basketball shoes or whatever else. At this point, obviously, they don't have any sort of data on me to recommend anything useful, but they could. So, and based on each of these, you could set your KPIs. So, I hope my thought process is visible to you. That I'm trying to, instead of trying to figure a top-down way of thinking, to look at it and say, okay, these are the 10 KPIs they should have everywhere. I'm saying, okay, let's start from the bottom up. Let's think of the different customer behaviors, and based on that, what sort of KPI makes sense for each of them, and given the effort and rewards and maybe risk as well, which one do you want to focus on? And that would give you a somewhat optimized state. And based on that, you would want to shape your entire, obviously, marketing and product experience as well. You would create advertising that speaks the right words to the people in each segment. You would create even different landing pages per customer group, and so on, to make sure that there's a coherent messaging that matches whatever KPI you have, whether you want to maintain their purchasing behavior or you want to increase it, or you want to just get some people to buy something for the first time. But before you figure out how to execute it, it really starts with you understanding the way people behave, and setting specific goals, and then going out and focusing on design and copy and product and feature and metrics. And then the third state is, personalization. So we talked about a state in which it's not optimized at all, or somewhat optimized, and then deeply optimized, which is the final state. Previously in a few other slides, in the past few slides, we talked about this sort of hierarchy where we can go deep. So we want to take this and we want to go deeper in order to deeply personalize. We want to look at gender, we want to look at age, we want to look at region and country. We can look at common purchase category. If you're a runner versus a football player, maybe there's a different frequency of purchase that you have. Maybe there's, I'm just thinking out loud, maybe yes, maybe no. And based on that behavior that is tied to the category of what you're doing, there might be higher or lower value. For example, maybe some sports are more expensive than the others when it comes to buying equipment. And there's also timing of purchase, value of purchase, things like this. Imagine you understand these about individuals, which at the scale of Nike, when you're Nike, you will, because you're collecting these information from users. So based on understanding these, again, for each person, you would want to decide, like, what do I want to do with the value that this person is generating for my business, or the value that I'm generating for the person that I get to capture some of it? What do I do with it, and how do I measure? And this will be a work of product teams and data engineering teams and data scientist team. And that's something that a lot of companies do and Nike can do. Taking a step back from all of these, going back to these, I think I've addressed a lot of these, maybe not by giving exact answers to them, but you can get an idea how conversion in general is, how companies approach conversions and optimization.